this trip, one of the questions I had foremost in my mind was to work out what regional views were on US foreign policy towards the Middle East, particularly views from some of the people we might meet on the presidential candidates, Clinton and Trump, and they didn't disappoint. Everybody had views, and there was actually quite a surprising consensus. The second impression I took away was, I think, a better understanding of the regional picture. I was quite surprised to understand the extent of cooperation happening between Israel and Egypt, for example, some of the very productive and fruitful cooperation that's happened in recent times, spurred by instability in the Sinai. People are reconciled to the reality that although both of the candidates in the US election at the moment have a deep interest in Israel, particularly in the wider region, neither of them is in a rush to sort of invest significant resources while they're facing a domestic population that wants more focus at home. So I think there's a realism in Israel from the people I spoke to, certainly, that for the immediate future, they may need to think that they're essentially preparing for a US that is less engaged in solving the problems of the region, and that's sort of leading to some of the more pragmatic organising happening with some unlikely partners. So getting a chance to meet with Saul Singer and then getting a chance to spend some time at the startups, hearing from actual startups pitching towards us was fascinating. Clearly one of the big enablers of such a thriving innovation scene in Israel is the connection to the US, not only at the sort of diplomatic and political level, but the deep sort of people-to-people linkages, which I hadn't quite appreciated before going on this trip. So I've come away, I think, with a lot more questions than I had when I began. Very keen to go back.
Really, I found very disheartening was the consequence of this growth of the anti-normalisation movement within Palestine and within the West Bank, particularly where we were, which I wrote about in my column. And this, I think, is a new thing. This is something that's grown in strength. And it's the idea that's grown on the Palestinian side that any form of normalisation, as they call it, of relations with Israel is a sellout. The only thing they want is just the end of the occupation, or probably the end of Israel altogether. It's an absolutist position, and it just has most horrible consequences. So, for instance, there was the case I highlighted in the article I wrote about a football peace match in between Israeli kids and Palestinian kids, and the Palestinian authorities and the head of the Palestine Olympic movement condemned this as being just a terrible thing, that two sets of kids should be playing football. And put on that level, you just see that this is an inhuman and ideological and dogmatic point of view. And then the other one I mentioned in there too was a program for Palestinian farmers to learn from Israeli farmers on irrigation, because Israeli farmers are obviously very good at irrigation, and this too had been condemned as a terrible example of normalisation, that Palestinian farmers and Israeli farmers should not be allowed to mix. And possibly because of the situation Israel is in, it's more and more on its own. It's on its own resources, much as Australia was in the early days. There wasn't much help come from Britain; they had to make a go of it. That inspires people. Well, we've got to do it. The fence is broke. We've got to fix it. That kind of attitude. So I found that tremendously encouraging, I thought that maybe too that's another reason why Australians recognise what's happening and feel on the same wavelength. We're both that kind of nation. We're not nations that look back to the golden age. We look forward to it.